I'm Tom Langton, and this presentation takes a look at a new analysis of DEFRA's bovine TB control policy in England since 2013, and it was prepared by the Animal and Plant Health Agency. These are my views as an independent consulting scientist on why the government BTB epidemiology is flawed and needs drastic overhaul. It follows the killing of nearly 250,000, mostly BTB uninfected wild badgers since 2013, with a public subsidy approaching £100 million. Currently in charge are Secretary of State for DEFRA, Therese Coffey, who took over from George Eustace in late 2022, with Richard Benyon, Minister of State for Biosecurity, Marine and Rural Affairs, who runs DEFRA. There's also Mark Spencer, not shown here, who is the Minister of State for Food, Farming and Fisheries. Third along here is Gideon Henderson, who is the DEFRA Chief Scientific Advisor, who took over from Ian Boyd in 2019, and Christine Middlemiss, the Chief Veterinary Officer, who took over from Nigel Gibbons at the end of 2017. One of the biggest problems around bovine TB and badger culling science has been the unwarranted secrecy. Information courts have chided the government about unnecessary secrecy for many years, as open access to data enables the scientific community to monitor and assist disease elimination. DEFRA has, however, refused to discuss BTB science with me and others examining the evidence independently in recent years. This was after they had commented on my draft report in 2021 using data that were in the public domain and that we published in 2022 as a peer-reviewed paper. Until 2022, the only DEFRA analyses of the effects of badger culling were from the 3 pilot badger cull areas, each having done 2 or 4 years of culling up to 2017. As shown here, the blue years are before culling and the pink years during culling. However, these studies over a few years offer an inadequate sample size and were over-modelled using an inappropriate method from the RBCT that I'll come on to later. So in 2021, the 4-year reporting gap was becoming rather suspicious, so we decided to take a look at the available data. The DEFRA study using data to 2017 claimed an up to 66% decrease in BTB breakdown incidents due to badger culling. This was despite it not being shown by the real-time data, where BTB incidents did not decline significantly in the first 2 pilot cull areas, as was actually confirmed when the 2018 data was added in a published note in Vet Record in 2019 by veterinarians Mark Jones and Ian McGill. Then a paper was published in Veterinary Record in March of last year, 2022, by me, Mark Jones and Ian McGill, showing no discernible difference in BTB breakdown incidence or prevalence in culled and unculled areas of the English high-risk area. Of particular interest was the rapidity with which some of the herds in more recently infected counties responded to the introduction of annual tuberculin skin testing in 2010. In central England, BTB herd incidence peaked on or before 2013 and before the start of the badger cull rollout from 2016, shown here by the yellow arrow. The black line here shows the trend for the entire high-risk area. The blue line is the first small Gloucestershire pilot area that peaked in 2011. Now, AFA didn't like this analysis, and Christine Middlemiss, the chief vet, criticised it on her government vet blog, claiming little benefit could be expected in the first 2 years of culling, which is odd because AFA papers have always shown benefit in the first 2 years, but also that areas going into badger culling each year had higher levels of cattle TB incidence than unculled areas in general. Data then released showed what we knew, that some unculled areas are slightly higher or lower than average, but this does not actually affect the outcomes. And so if you adjust for the differences, it doesn't change the overall conclusions of the 2022 paper. AFA then failed to quantify or qualify their view, or even discuss it, frankly, and remain bottom-mouthed, which is probably why they then shut down communications with us as they carried on culling badgers in 2022. Then a scientific preprint led by Paul Torgerson of the Vet Suisse faculty at the University of Zurich was put online in December 2022 and updated in May 2023, to which I also contributed. It's multi-authored largely by researchers based in Switzerland and not influenced by Westminster agri-politics. This paper is a deep dive into the methods of the randomized badger culling trial, RBCT, carried out between 1998 and 2005, published in 2006 in the journal Nature by Crystal Donnelly and others. And this preprint finds that while the RBCT was to some extent a planned analysis, it did not have a detailed and clear analytical protocol, an analytical protocol of a kind that today is considered essential for biological trial validation. Secondly, the methodology of the key 2006 paper indicates analysis using herd breakdown exposure rate before badger culling started. But in fact, it didn't. It used a fixed count approach, which is counterintuitive from a veterinary epidemiology perspective. The published method simply implied one thing while something else was done. Further, there was a bold claim of the key statisticians in 2010 that their work was infallible, sitting uncomfortably with some of the basic principles of science. The new 2023 evaluation finds that using herd exposure rate in a conventional manner reverses the RBCT finding relating to badger culling relating badger culling to falling BTB herd breakdowns. And a statistical comparison method looking at predictive power indicates that the best model of the data does not involve badger culling. So the more plausible RBCT result is now that culling badgers has no impact on BTB herd breakdown in cattle. Now, this work cannot be characterized as model dredging, simply as model checking. Because of the paper's wording, this change of method might not have been spotted or appreciated by peer reviewers at the time of publication unless they tried to rerun the model, as we do. The findings in 2006 were extremely influential because the RBCT has been the bedrock of government policy since 2011 in particular. RBCT results hardened industry dislike, if not hatred, of badgers, triggering the spending of millions of pounds of public funds on the mass shooting and incineration of badgers. And this has been one of the greatest biological issues of our time and has heavily distracted the UK wildlife epidemiology for a generation. Next, and the main focus of this talk, on the 6th of September came an online preprint of the bovine TB data for badger cull areas since 2013 by Colin Birch and 5 other Animal and Plant Health Agency staff, entitled Difference in Differences Analysis Evaluates the Effects of the Badger Control Policy on Bovine Tuberculosis in England. Unfortunately, the data and modelling code were not supplied, so it's not possible to check it properly. But it makes the claim herd incidence rate of TB reduced by 56% up to the 4th year of BCP, that's Badger Control Policy, interventions, with the largest reductions in the 2nd and 3rd years. These estimates are the most precise for the timing of declining cattle TB associated with interventions primarily targeting badgers. So, AFA are now using the terms badger control policy and interventions primarily targeting badgers, which is something that needs to be carefully unpicked. We first had a glimpse of this analysis in August 2022, when it was shown at a vet conference in Canada by Birch, with this ski slope of change attributed to badger culling. The next month, the Junior Minister of State for DEFRA, Mark Spencer, began using the claims in Parliament, stating that badger culling was working well. He said, evidence suggests that the badger cull has been effective in reducing bovine tuberculosis incidence in cull areas by 45% after 3 years of culling and 50% after 4 years. So this was a warm-up to the new deception, but at that time, how the data had been manipulated wasn't really clear. To try to explain the AFA approach in this research, this illustrates semi-diagrammatically the period from 2009 to 2021 in question. As the years go by from left to right, more of the unculled, or actually pre-culled areas, that is, cull areas before culling, involved, here shown in blue, are culled, as shown in pink. But unculled areas are used to create a single data point at the bottom here, while cull years are treated individually up to 4 years and then 5+ years altogether. So this has the effect of erasing pre-cull trends and manipulates the model into showing a more pronounced before and after effect. In fairness, the preprint also shows the real-time trends in herd breakdown incidents in its figure 6. As you can see here, these are really wholly unimpressive with respect to any obvious effect relating to the start of badger culling, the vertical red line. Just look at the longest running culls in the first 2 pilot culls, top left. All this is, however, rather overshadowed by the complex claims made in the text. As mentioned earlier, what we do know from August 2022 is that AFA began to shift the branding as it uses to describe its cattle test and slaughter and movement control program. This is a slide from August 2022. They started to merge terminology, so it is a part of something called badger control policy, and there's a reason for this. It stems from something Ian Boyd, the DEFRA Chief Scientific Advisor from 2012 to 2019, and one of the key badger cull proponents, wrote in June 2019. And this was in response to a legal challenge opposing supplementary or additional badger culling, extra 5 years, and in relation to measuring bovine TB herd breakdown. It is not possible to examine any single measure, such as supplementary badger culling alone, as having a positive or negative effect, which became a problem to DEFRA, given that High Court and Court of Appeal side comments were that what DEFRA was doing with supplementary culling was an experiment and therefore needed monitoring and reporting. The new AFA Birch preprint ignores this and simply lumps everything together, so the minister can call it badger culling. What you can actually measure is the effect of combined interventions to see the difference between herds inside and outside cull areas, which is what we did in 2022, finding no difference, and reduction over time being the better match with decline than badger culling, suggesting that cattle interventions are responsible for the visible changes. And this makes Boyd's position less convincing. There are several other ways to examine this if you control the secret database, as AFA do, but they haven't, or if they have, they don't want people to know. What the new AFA preprint does is to try to lump all the cattle interventions under an umbrella called interventions primarily targeting badgers. This sort of sleight of hand is more than a little unconvincing for reasons I'm now going to try to explain a bit more. Culling mostly healthy badgers is clearly an extreme intervention that has been superimposed on a constantly changing series of cattle measures undertaken since 2010 by vets and farmers. Notably, firstly, the tuberculin skin test or SICKET test has tightened steadily over the years. How has it tightened? Well, the frequency of testing has changed to annual from 2010 and then used more often to check herds thought to be infected, and then more recently introduced on a 6-monthly basis. Secondly, what is called the severity of interpretation of the skin test has changed according to skin swelling response or bump size once injected with tuberculin, once the neck of the cow has been injected with tuberculin, to better identify a higher percentage of infected reactors. And then the short day interval 60-day test has been introduced to help stop infected herds from returning to trading. So these are the shifting sands of BTB test tightening over the study period that is to be said has glossed over, as also with gamma interferon testing. So with gamma, this was initially introduced patchily for persistent or repeat breakdown herds only, to help look for infectious cows that are unresponsive to the tuberculin test and that are sitting there perpetuating BTB infection. Then gamma testing was increased via its use in parallel with the tuberculin test to increase the proportion of true BTB reactors identified. However, the use for both persistent herds and in parallel with skin testing has been erratic, and almost it looks as if it's been controlled so as not to clear herds too frequently at rates that will disrupt trading and livestock supply chain dynamics, which has been a controlling force in the issue. So these interventions have not been, although they've been tightened up throughout the period, they've been tightened up in a patchy way in place to place. Now I'm going to look more directly in 5 ways at whether AFA's difference in difference, or DID, analytical preprint approach is actually appropriate. DID is used in economics and social science, so it's an unconventional approach in epidemiology. DID usually compares treatment and control groups over a set time period in the normal way. However, the AFA study doesn't really do this. It uses the single group of 52 cull areas, or a single group of 52 cull areas, culled between 2013 and 2021 in a before and after way, going back to the pre-cull period of 2009, which is an unusual approach to the unconventional method. Maybe it's appropriate, maybe not. Let's have a closer look. Again, we can look semi-diagrammatically at the unculled and culled data pattern. 2 periods, years along the top, before culling in blue and during culling in pink. One problem with the pre-cull and cull years as they vary across time is that treatments in cull areas are not discrete and will influence neighbouring areas through infected cattle movements. This is unavoidable. The problem here is it conflicts with the separation rules for use of DID. For example, as you can see in 2018, pre-cull areas will be heavily mixed amongst cull areas. Next, I'm going to ask, is mixing high risk and edge area data wise? The HRA data comprises 46 cull areas, disease since 2000 or before. Herd incidence is slowly reducing at the county level, dropping at around 5% a year since 2015. However, the edge area data comes from 6 cull areas, moderately diseased, and more recently diseased than the HRA, yet reducing often rapidly, very rapidly from 2020. So in these 6 edge areas was very significant pre-cull gamma testing for persistent herds throughout the 4 years before culling. So some of these generalities in the Birch preprint are basically oversimplifications of the true nature of the timing and extent of veterinary interventions. The HRA and edge areas have very different epidemiological backgrounds and treatments. So I think the answer to this question about mixing data is no, it's a really bad idea. And in doing so is a step away from looking at the efficacy of badger culling. And you have to ask really why this was done. Thirdly, and without wanting to labour the point, were badger culling with gamma testing the main interventions? Well, here's just some of the others. It's very complex. There are really 3 phases in the data, one blue with nearly all pre-cull data. The 3-year period where pre-cull and cull is mixed, about a third or half of the data mixed together, and is shown in grey, 2017 to 2019, and then the 2 years with mainly cull data in pink. In these periods, you can see a whole range of overlapping controls gradually tightening, but often then relaxed, helping to increase detection. But as mentioned earlier, often used in patchy ways. It looks as though some are eased off in order to manage detection rates to preserve normal trading over disease control. And fourthly, looking specifically at the timing of use of gamma interferon testing, in the edge area, it was 3 or 4 years before culling started, not after. And in the high-risk area, it's often used in years 1 and 2 of culling, sometimes actually with more disclosures, gamma disclosures, than in years 3 or 4. So something has gone wrong with the AFA reporting in this research. And finally, there's been some distortion. It's a presentational factor. The benefit that's attributed to badger culling in figure 4 could equally be attributed to cattle testing. It is exaggerated through use of log on the y-axis. And on the top right-hand side here, I've compressed it back to a more realistic shape. And you have to ask why the visual tricks. Bottom right is figure 5 from Birch et al., where trend over time is simply reporting the effect of cattle testing policy, again dressed up as badger culling policy, or badger control policy. So there's a fair bit of smoke and mirrors getting in here. One of the most alarming claims of the AFA preprint is that officially TB-free status withdrawn, OTFW, here in blue, is the most reliable indicator of BTB infection in cattle. Now, this notion has been creeping into the AFA epidemiology reports in recent years in preparation for a move from killing 70% of badgers to 100% in the future. What the 2020 government BTB policy revision said would be only in exceptional circumstances. OTFW are herds withdrawn due to the identification of lesioned infections in cows that fell by a half from around 2016 to 2021. As first shown in our March 2022 vet record paper. What we do know is that back with the RBCT between 1998 and 2005, and as the epidemic that we're still in worsened, both OTFW and OTFS, which we now know together represent herds with detected infected reactors, skin test reactors, both doubled as infection rose and spread. However, what we see here with the post-2010 fall is that as infection drops, OTFS stays level and it even rises slightly. This is a worry because it means that while tougher testing is reducing more obvious, generally older, although you do get visible lesions in calves, lesioned infections, newer infections are being detected because of the tougher testing, showing the extent of undetected infections that are present. As OTFS fails to fall. Also, there are a few more false positives. But if badger culling was a factor, you might expect OTFS, including the newer infections, to be going down. All the signs are that this trend is reflecting tougher testing finding previously hidden infection in herds. It's also worrying because it means that testing is failing to stop new infections generated by the well of undisclosed infection. That was indicated by DEFRA's first wider use of gamma interferon testing in 2017 and 2018. So this is what I think is likely to be happening. Let's take a look at all herds with one or more infected cows. This block representation shows infected cows in different herds, starting at the bottom as calves and growing up past yearling stage to adulthood, although some of them will be infected as adults. With tuberculin testing, a herd is withdrawn from movement and trading, that's OTFW, shown in pink here, as a skin test reactor with visible lesions at slaughter or culture positive or PCR positive, meant these days as a test positive. Reactors are picked up as calves, yearlings, and adults. Herds with reactors without lesions or culture positive may remain as OTFS, i.e. suspended, shown here as orange, sometimes with what are called inconclusive reactors, these being the smaller skin bump reactors kept in isolation before slaughter, as mostly all of them are infected. What stands out here is the substantial number of individuals and herds escaping detection to bolster the epidemic. There are some calves and yearlings indicated in grey here where the infection is too recent to be detected, and some recovered and latent cows to factor in. But the big picture is one of ineffective detection using immune-based tests. Next, you can add the influence of use of gamma testing, shown in green, adding 10% or so to detection, but still missing key numbers, as it is a immune-based test with similar limitations to the skin test in identifying anergic individuals. As I said, this is semi-diagrammatic, so the ratios will vary to a degree. But finally, you can see the all-important residual numbers here in blue that are only detectable using tests that involve alternative technology. The Enfoplex antibody blood test does not, like the Sickert and gamma test, require an immune response from the cow. But to get nearer to the 100% identification, you need bacteriophage. This is a safe technology used on humans since the 1990s. It's probably not been used because effective disease elimination would upset the livestock trade dynamics too greatly by actually identifying all the diseased animals. We know the skin test and gamma test together won't do the job because Republic of Ireland have been using them together and failed to get BTB much below 1 in 20 herds for over 20 years, while killing badgers too. So there's good evidence to go on. Basically, you can go on culling badgers and pouring public funds into cattle slaughter compensation, but it won't work by 2038 or by 2083 for that matter. If you want to resolve this disease, you have to move to testing that works or vaccinate the entire herd with all the costs and issues that invokes. There really isn't anything in between, but if you do test properly, you may not need to vaccinate. So coming to a conclusion now, there is a pyramid of issues with what I'm calling OTFU, unidentified infection, as the key factor that BTB disease elimination needs to recognize and address. It is this well of infection that includes infectious cattle under 15 months, but before 2007 were not seen as a major issue. The key is use of tests that finish the job, as has been shown at the few trial locations, such as Gatcombe, and there are several around. Will removal mean lower productivity in the industry for a few years? Yes, but relief for the public purse and better farming days ahead. So my conclusions on the new AFA science offering and the other research basically, government bovine TB epidemiology is misconceived and it's misleading and wrong. There is an incorrect obsession with badgers playing a significant role. There's a mismatch between policy, science, and real needs, lack of appreciation or even denial of the depth of hidden BTB reservoir in herds. But the good news is there is enough now known for BTB elimination over a 5-year period or more, maybe, primarily using biophage for pre-movement testing and maybe staggering elimination across English counties as was done in the 1960s. Thank you.